Nobody taught her about profit and loss. Nobody taught her about investing profit to increase the size of your business. Nobody even discussed franchising with a 13-year-old child or employment training. My 13-year-old daughter's doing all of that online in a virtual reality in what could be termed a game. Now, it doesn't take an expert, does it, to sit there and realize how powerful that learning experience is for our young people. So imagine the power if we could actually learn how to harness that technology in our classrooms with our students and find a way to use it to actually push the boundaries even further. Where could that take our children? There was an interesting piece of research that was published about a year ago by Professor Henry Jenkins, who I think's got the best job title in the world. He is Professor of Futures Scoping at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which I'm sure you all know is one of the world's leaders in technological futures thinking. And he's like the guru of gurus at the top of MIT. Now, he produced some interesting research that I thought was fascinating recently because he was talking about what 21st century literacy means. So in other words, if children are going to be literate in the 21st century, what skills and competencies and behaviors do they need, right? So here they are. Here are the key lists that I've taken from the report, the key words that are taken from the report. So he says that play is a vital skill in terms of 21st century literacy. The ability to play, the ability to work through scenarios, I guess. Well, kids are brilliant at that, aren't they? And again, if you think about how well technology supports that and the way our young people play and develop scenarios through gaming, extraordinary. Performance, they have to understand their own performance. They have to be able to assess, quantify, and improve their performance levels. So there's a whole thing there about self-analysis. It's an interesting thing. Simulation. They have to be able, through their own mindset, to be able to simulate scenarios before they happen. You know, one of the great characteristics of good leaders and successful people is they're able to visualize things and work through problems in their minds before the problems occur. So that when they come across a problem or a scenario or a situation, they've already worked through the possible ideas. Well, simulation. How does and my point goes back to the thing I said right at the beginning. How can technology support these things? Because I think the answer is easily. Knowing how to behave. That's an interesting thing. We think young people don't. But I'll come back to this later. Just watch a young person in a role-play game on a computer. The way they have to learn how to interact with different characters to get what they need. Whether they're after information, whether they have to manipulate a character to get what they need. They're experts in it. The key possibly is they don't realize it, and nor do we. We don't know how to harness that natural ability in the way we educate our children. Multitasking. Boy, how many of you have got teenagers? How many of you have had the argument with your teenagers about how they do their homework? Right. Television on, music on, computer on, mobile phone on, and they're doing their homework. Isn't that interesting? They are brilliant at multitask. I look at my daughter and walk into her bedroom, turn that off, how can you concentrate? And her argument is, well, actually, Dad, if I don't have all that stuff going, I can't concentrate. And there's a very interesting report that some of you might want to refer back to that was produced in 2001 by Mark Prensky, who is a world expert, neuroscientist and educator, who did some very interesting research in 2001, which argues quite convincingly, I think, that children's brains have evolved to be different to ours because of the world in which they live. Because of the information-rich world that they live in, their brains have been actually, they're starting to fire those neurons slightly differently, so they're able to handle multiple streams of information at phenomenal speed. But what they can't do, because their brains are wiring differently to ours, is concentrate on one thing for a sustained period of time. So it's not that they're being deliberately naughty or difficult and that they can't concentrate like we could when we were younger. Because of the world around them, their brains are actually firing differently. So again, I think that's a very interesting challenge for us as educators. How do we understand that information? How do we cope with it? Once we understand it, how do we use that, both to help children concentrate over sustained periods of time, but also, are we, through their educational experience, really feeding that ability to multitask? Because that way we could probably get children to be far more productive and more relaxed, because it would be more their own kind of experience in a classroom. Networking. Well, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I was talking to somebody last night. I can't remember if they're here. I don't think they are. Somebody last night was saying to me, I was watching a young person network recently. He said, I was round at my family's house, and their teenage son, who'd been on the computer doing some networking, I think, had come into the kitchen in the middle of the evening and said, I'm going to have coffee with a friend. I'm going to go and take some coffee with a friend. And the kid, they all looked at him and went, oh, okay, fine, all right. Anyway, he came to the kitchen, got a coffee, and went back to the computer, right? So about an hour later, this guy went in there and said, I thought you were going to have coffee with a friend. He said, I am. And the friend was in Japan. And they were on webcam sharing a coffee together, right? How cool is that, right? Networking is an amazing thing. My daughter has friends all over the world. When I was a kid, I don't know about you, I went on a French exchange. I went to France on an exchange visit. I had a pen friend for about a year because, frankly, I couldn't be bothered to write back. You know how it is, right? Anyway, you'd write a letter. The reason was you'd write a letter, wouldn't you? You'd wait 6 weeks for a reply. Now our kids are networking instantly. They're amazing at it. Knowing what tools to use. Now that's an interesting challenge for us in education. It goes back to the Google thing. It's all very well that kids can research stuff, but they really know which tools to use to maximize what it is they're looking for. Do they also understand both the power of technology, but also the power of old-fashioned skills? Because sometimes it's not always good to use technology to find the solution or to help you. So are we really developing that enough in our education system to help our children understand the power of all of those tools at their disposal? And finally, negotiation. Well, teenagers were born negotiators, weren't they? It's time for bed. 10 more minutes. No, now. Go on, 10 more minutes. If I go to bed now, will you give me more pocket money? All right, go to bed now, right? Teenagers are brilliant at that. And again, how can technology help those things? One of the things that I'm fascinated by is in education, we believe we have a divine right that children should just understand that education's important. Do you know what I mean? There's just this belief that because it is, kids should understand it's important. And if kids don't think it's important, then there's something wrong with them, or we need to punish them to make them realize how important it is. It's true though, isn't it? We just assume children should like coming to school. I raised a point last night in a speech I was giving, that when I was a head teacher, one of the questions I asked in my school, and it raised a giggle last night, and I'm sure it will now. I took on a failing school, and one of the first questions I asked in that school was, how do we turn our school into Disneyland? And people laughed at me. But actually, there was a very serious point there, because 21st century children are probably the most sophisticated consumers the world has yet produced. Do you know what I mean? They are so used to on-demand anything. They are so used to controlling, as consumers, the products they buy, the way they buy them, the way they interact with them. Look at how Amazon works. Amazon doesn't sell or market anything. It relies on its customers, doesn't it, to give feedback on products and star ratings on the quality of service. There is an interaction. And of course, marketing, whether we like it or not, has transformed the way our children see the world in a way we never did when we were young. So they are incredibly complex consumers. So turning around to a young child, a consumer in the 21st century, and saying school's important because I say so, isn't enough. Because kids, rightly or wrongly, of course, have got this massive expanse of experience. So one of the things I think is an interesting challenge, and again I would raise the question, how does technology help with this, is we have to rebrand learning. We actually have to spend time as educators selling learning to our children like it was a product. Now, I know that might feel immoral to some people, but actually, why shouldn't we? Because what we need is our children to be highly educated. We want all of our children to embrace learning and education in the school process. So why would it be wrong to actually sell it to kids. Because if we were as brilliant at selling education as Nintendo is about marketing the latest computer game, can you imagine how powerful education would be and how successful the process would be?